I wasn't supposed to be home this early. The meeting at work had been cancelled at the last moment, and I decided to call it a day. It was unusual for me to come home before dinner, but I thought it would be a nice surprise for my wife and daughter. Maybe we'd eat together for once, watch something on TV, have a normal evening. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't natural. I placed my keys on the counter and walked toward the living room. That's when I heard it, the hushed whispers, the sound of fabric shifting, the unmistakable presence of someone who wasn't supposed to be there. I took a slow step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw them. My wife, Jennifer, tangled in the arms of another man. She froze the moment our eyes met, her face draining of color. The man beside her, some guy in his 40s, with slicked back hair and a smirk that quickly disappeared, pulled away. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My body felt disconnected from my mind as I tried to process what I was seeing. Alex! Jennifer's voice cracked as she pulled the blanket over herself, as if that could hide what she had done. I took a step back, swallowing hard. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, not out of anger but out of sheer disbelief. How long? I managed to say. Jennifer opened her mouth, but before she could answer, another voice cut through the room. Dad? I turned my head, and there she was. My 16-year-old daughter, Sophie, standing in the hallway, watching me. There was no shock on her face. No guilt. No concern. Just coldness. I waited for her to say something, anything, but when she finally spoke, her words cut deeper than any betrayal ever could. You should just disappear. My heart stopped. For a moment I thought I had misheard her. That maybe the pain in my chest was warping my perception. But her expression remained unchanged. Indifferent. Like I wasn't even her father. I took a shaky breath, looking between my wife, her lover, and my daughter. My own flesh and blood. This wasn't just about an affair. This was something far, far worse. I didn't remember leaving the house. One moment, I was standing there, staring at my wife and the man she had betrayed me with, at my daughter who had looked at me like I was nothing, and the next, I was outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I walked. I didn't know where I was going. My mind was spinning, stuck on those words. You should just disappear. Why? Why would she say that? I could understand Jennifer's betrayal. It hurt like hell, but affairs happened. People lied. They fell out of love. I had seen it before, even if I never thought it would happen to me. But Sophie? My little girl? She didn't look surprised. She didn't look hurt or confused or angry at her mother. She looked relieved. Like she had been waiting for this. Like I was the problem. I sat down on a bench in the park near our house, my breath visible in the cold. My phone was buzzing in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know it was Jennifer. Probably some pathetic excuse, some attempt to control the damage. I ignored it. Instead, I tried to piece it together. Had I done something wrong? Had I missed something? I thought back to the last few months. Things had been a little distant, sure. Jennifer was working late more often, Sophie was always on her phone, avoiding conversations. But I thought it was just normal family life. People got busy. Had they been pushing me away this whole time? Had I been blind? The phone buzzed again. And again. This time I looked. Sophie, don't come back. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. I wasn't wanted. Not by my wife. Not by my daughter. I had spent 16 years raising her, loving her, thinking I was being the best father I could be. And now she was telling me not to come back? I gritted my teeth and stood up. No. I wasn't going to just walk away. I deserved answers. I deserved the truth. And I was going to get it. By the time I reached the house, my hands had gone numb from the cold, but I barely felt it. My mind was a storm, spinning between rage, confusion, and something far worse, doubt. I stood outside for a moment, staring at the home I had built, the place where I had once felt safe. Now, it felt like enemy territory. I wasn't going to disappear. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Jennifer was waiting in the living room, arms crossed, her face unreadable. The man, her lover, was gone. Sophie was nowhere in sight. She exhaled sharply, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her voice low. I let out a hollow laugh. "Excuse me?" Her jaw tightened. "You could have just left. It would have been easier." "Easier for who?" I shot back. "For you? For him?" I pointed toward the space where her lover had been sitting not even an hour ago. "Or for Sophie?" Jennifer flinched, but she recovered quickly. "Alex, you don't understand." "Then explain it to me." I took a step closer. "Explain why my daughter, our daughter, looked me in the eye and told me to disappear like I was nothing. Like I was the problem." Jennifer hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. She knew. She knew exactly why Sophie had said it. I felt something shift inside me, something dark and unfamiliar. I had come back for answers, and I wasn't leaving without them. "Where is she?" I asked. Jennifer pressed her lips together. "She's in her room." I didn't wait for permission. I walked past her and up the stairs, my footsteps heavy. My own daughter didn't want me here. I had to know why. I knocked on her door. "Sophie." Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. "We need to talk." More silence. I reached for the handle and pushed the door open. She was sitting on her bed, phone in hand, not even looking up at me. Like she had expected this. Like she didn't care. "Sophie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What the hell is going on?" She finally looked at me, her eyes cold, distant. "You should have left when you had the chance." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Is that what you want? For me to just walk away?" She didn't answer. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down at it, then locked the screen before I could see anything. Something was off. This wasn't just about the affair. Something bigger was going on. And I was going to find out what. Sophie's phone vibrated again. She gripped it tighter, her knuckles turning white. I stepped forward, and for the first time in my life, my daughter looked at me not with annoyance, not with the usual teenage indifference, but with fear. Not fear of me. Fear of something else. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked, my voice even. "It's none of your business." Her answer was quick, rehearsed. "It is my business," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "You told me to disappear, Sophie. You looked me in the eye and told me to leave. After everything I've done for you. After everything we've been through as a family." She finally looked at me, and for the first time, there was hesitation in her eyes. A crack in the wall she had built between us. But just as quickly it was gone. "You need to stop acting like the victim," she said, voice low. "You don't know anything." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Then tell me. Make me understand." Silence. Her phone vibrated again, and she shifted slightly, angling it away from me. Something about that small, instinctive movement sent alarm bells ringing in my head. This wasn't just about Jennifer's affair. This wasn't just teenage rebellion. There was something deeper at play. I exhaled sharply. "Let me see your phone." Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she scoffed, shaking her head. "No. Sophie." "I said no!" she snapped, standing up so fast that her phone slipped from her grip and hit the floor. The screen lit up. I didn't mean to look. I didn't want to invade her privacy. But when I saw the message, when I saw the name on the screen, my entire body went cold. Unknown number, has he figured it out yet? I looked up at Sophie, my heart pounding. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. And that was when I knew. She was hiding something. Something bigger than Jennifer's affair. Something that could destroy everything. Sophie snatched the phone from the floor before I could reach for it. Her fingers hovered over the screen, and in an instant she swiped away the message, erasing it before I could read anything more. But it was too late. I had seen enough. Has he figured it out yet? Whoever was texting her knew about me. Knew about what was happening. Knew something I didn't. Sophie, I said, my voice steady but firm. Who was that? She clenched her jaw, gripping the phone like it was her lifeline. Just a friend. A friend? I repeated, stepping closer. A friend who's asking if I figured it out yet. What exactly am I supposed to be figuring out, Sophie? She looked away. I don't know. Bullshit. Her head snapped back to me, her face flashing with something between anger and panic. I'm done with the lies, I continued. I don't care if you hate me, Sophie. I don't care if you never want to look at me again. But you will tell me the truth. Right now. She swallowed hard, and for a moment, I thought she might actually give in. But then her expression hardened again. You wouldn't believe me even if I told you, she muttered. Try me. She shook her head. Just drop it, Dad. It's better that way. I exhaled sharply, running a hand down my face. My patience was wearing thin, but more than that, I was scared. Scared of what my own daughter was involved in. Scared of what I didn't know. Then, another realization hit me. Sophie, I said carefully. How long have you known about your mother's affair? She flinched. Just slightly. But enough for me to see it. She didn't answer. You knew, didn't you? My voice was quieter now, but filled with something deeper than anger, betrayal. How long? Still, she said nothing. But she didn't have to. The way she looked at me, the guilt, the hesitation, told me everything. Not only had my wife been lying to me, but my own daughter had been part of it. And I had been the fool all along. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Sophie wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt something inside me crack. You knew, I said again, my voice hollow. You knew this whole time. She pressed her lips together, her fingers tightening around her phone. How long, Sophie? My words were sharper now, demanding. How long have you been lying to me? I wasn't lying, she shot back, but her voice wavered. I didn't tell you. I let out a bitter laugh. That's the same thing. She exhaled, shaking her head. I didn't think you needed to know. I felt a surge of something dark rise in my chest. You didn't think I needed to know that my wife, your mother, was sleeping with another man? Sophie's gaze flickered with something unreadable. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, I snapped. It is that simple, Sophie. Your mother cheated. And you knew. And you still. My voice broke, just for a second. You still chose her over me. She looked away, crossing her arms over her chest. It wasn't about choosing. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions from boiling over. Who is he? I asked, my voice quieter now. She hesitated. I took a step forward. Who is he, Sophie? Her phone buzzed again. She jumped. Before she could react, I snatched the phone from her hands. Dad, don't. I turned the screen toward me, my heart pounding. Another text from the same unknown number. Unknown number, stop asking questions. The blood in my veins turned ice cold. I looked up at Sophie. She was pale, her breath shaky. Sophie, I said slowly. Who the hell is this? She didn't answer. But she didn't need to. Because in that moment, I realized something horrifying. This wasn't just about the affair. This wasn't just about Jennifer cheating. There was someone else in the picture. Someone who didn't want me to find out the truth. And whoever they were watching us. My grip tightened around Sophie's phone as my heart pounded in my chest. Stop asking questions. The message felt like a warning. A direct threat. I looked up at Sophie. She was staring at me, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She wasn't just scared, she was trapped. and I was done playing games. "You're going to tell me what the hell is going on," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Right now." Sophie swallowed hard. "Give me my phone." I ignored her. "Who is this? Who keeps texting you?" She hesitated, glancing toward the door like she was planning to bolt. I stepped in front of her. "Don't." Her eyes darted back to mine, wide and uncertain. For the first time, I saw something else beneath her fear, guilt. She knew something. Something I wasn't supposed to find out. "Sophie." I tried again, my voice softer. "Please. Just tell me the truth." She hesitated, her hands curling into fists. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Her breathing was shaky. "No, Dad. You don't understand. If I tell you, things will get worse." A chill ran down my spine. "Worse than this?" I gestured around the room. "Worse than your mother cheating on me? Worse than you telling me to disappear like I meant nothing to you?" She flinched. For a split second, something cracked in her expression. The walls she had put up started to crumble. Then, finally, she spoke. "It's not just Mom," she whispered. My blood ran cold. "What?" Her eyes flickered with hesitation, like she was deciding how much to say. Then she dropped her gaze, her voice barely audible. "He's not just her boyfriend." I felt the air leave my lungs. The room around me suddenly felt smaller, darker. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just some guy Jennifer was sleeping with. This was something else. Something worse. I took a slow, measured breath. "Then who is he, Sophie?" She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. And then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, "He's the reason you were never supposed to come home early." I stared at Sophie, my pulse hammering in my ears. The reason I was never supposed to come home early? What the hell does that mean? My voice was low, steady, but inside my mind was spiraling. Sophie wouldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers twisted in the hem of her hoodie, her body tense. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, like she had already said too much. "Sophie," I said, trying to keep my tone controlled. "Tell me what's going on." She shook her head. I can't." "Yes, you can." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Listen to me. If you're in trouble, I need to know." She swallowed hard. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." I held up her phone. "Someone keeps texting you, warning you? Telling you not to talk to me. That's not normal, Sophie. That's not okay." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I pleaded. "Because right now, it feels like my own daughter is working against me." Her breath hitched. She turned away, pressing her hands to her face. I waited. Finally, in a broken voice, she whispered, "I thought it was better this way." I frowned. "Better how?" She took a shaky breath. "If you never found out, if you just left, you wouldn't get hurt." The words sent an icy chill down my spine. "What do you mean, get hurt?" I demanded. "Is someone threatening me?" Sophie hesitated. Then, slowly, she turned back toward me, her face pale. "They didn't want you here," she whispered. "You were supposed to go on your trip today. You weren't supposed to walk in on them," he said. She trailed off, shaking her head violently. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "What did he say, Sophie?" Her lips trembled. "Mom's boyfriend," she said, barely audible. My stomach twisted. "What about him?" She hesitated. Then, in the smallest, most terrified voice I had ever heard from her, she said, "He told Mom that if you ever found out, he'd make sure you disappeared." I felt the air leave my lungs. Disappeared. Not left. Not divorced. Disappeared. I let go of Sophie's shoulders and took a step back, my mind struggling to process what she had just said. "He said that?" My voice sounded distant, not my own. She nodded, her eyes filled with a fear that sent ice through my veins. I thought he was just saying it, you know. like an empty threat. Mom told me not to worry. She said it didn't concern me. I clenched my fists. That son of a... Sophie flinched. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Anger wouldn't help right now. I needed to stay clear-headed. Sophie, listen to me, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Who is this guy? What do you know about him? She hesitated, then shook her head. I don't know his real name. My stomach dropped. What do you mean you don't know? He just showed up one day, she admitted. At first, he was just some guy Mom was talking to. Then he started coming over when you weren't home. He was always watching. She swallowed hard. He said things about how things would be better if you were gone. How Mom deserved someone who would take care of her the way she needed. I exhaled sharply. And you believed him? She looked down, ashamed. Mom did. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to push down the boiling rage inside me. My wife, ex-wife, as far as I was concerned, had brought a man into my house who was planning something against me. And my daughter had been caught in the middle of it. I needed to know more. You said he threatened me, I said. How serious do you think he is? Sophie hesitated again. Then, slowly, she looked up at me. He's serious, Dad. A shiver ran down my spine. How do you know? She licked her lips, her breath shaky. Because. She took a deep breath, then whispered. I saw him with a gun. A gun. The word echoed in my head, sinking in like a knife to the gut. I took a step back, my body suddenly cold. Sophie, are you sure? She nodded, her face pale. I saw it last week. He came over when you were at work. He was in the kitchen with Mom, and I was coming downstairs when I saw him pull it out from his jacket. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Did he say anything? Sophie hesitated. I heard him tell Mom that he wasn't afraid to take care of things. That she didn't have to worry, that soon he wouldn't be a problem anymore. I didn't need to ask who he was. It was me. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face unreadable. I didn't want to scare her more than she already was. Where is he now? I asked, my voice tight. I don't know. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking small and fragile in a way I had never seen before. But he's always watching. He always knows where you are. He knew you were supposed to be at work today. That's why Mom didn't panic when you left this morning. A sickening realization washed over me. He had been waiting for me to leave. Waiting for the perfect moment. And I had ruined his plan by coming home early. I forced myself to think clearly. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need you to tell me everything you know about him. His name, what he looks like, anything. Sophie swallowed hard. I don't know his real name. Mom just calls him Rick. Rick. I repeated the name in my head, letting it settle. It could be fake, but it was something. What does he look like? Late 40s, maybe early 50s. She said shakily. Tall. Strong. He's got this scar on his jaw. A scar. I filed that away. I needed more. Have you seen his car? She nodded. Black SUV. Tinted windows. I saw him parked outside a couple of times. My pulse quickened. When? 2 nights ago. And earlier today, before you came home. A cold chill ran down my spine. He was here. Watching. Waiting. I forced myself to breathe. I needed to think. There was no way I was letting my daughter stay in this house with Jennifer and the man who wanted me gone. I took a slow step toward her. Sophie, I need you to pack a bag. Right now. We're leaving. Her eyes widened. But. No arguments, I said, my voice firm. I don't trust your mother. And I sure as hell don't trust him. She hesitated, looking torn. Sophie, I said, softer now. You have to trust me on this. She studied me for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded. Okay. I exhaled in relief. But as I turned toward the hallway, something outside caught my eye. Through the small gap in the curtains I saw it. A black SUV. Parked across the street. Waiting. Watching. And suddenly I knew. We were already too late. My blood turned to ice. The black SUV sat just beyond the edge of our driveway, its dark windows like lifeless eyes staring directly at the house. He was here. I forced my breathing to slow, my hands tightening into fists. Panicking wouldn't help. I had to think. I turned to Sophie, keeping my voice low and controlled. Go upstairs. Pack a bag. Now. Her eyes flicked toward the window, and she went pale. Is that him? I nodded. Move. Fast. She hesitated for only a second before bolting up the stairs. I watched the SUV, waiting for any sign of movement. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Did he know I had seen him? Was he just sitting there, waiting for me to make a move? I needed to get Sophie out. But how? If I walked through the front door, I'd be an easy target. If he had a gun, he could shoot before I even reached the car. I scanned the house. The back door. I hurried toward the kitchen, making sure not to move the curtains as I passed the windows. My hands shook as I unlocked the back door, cracking it open just enough to check the yard. It was empty. Good. I ran back to the stairs. Sophie! I called in a sharp whisper. She appeared at the top, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. I'm ready. Come on. I motioned her down, my voice urgent. She hurried down the steps, but just as she reached me, we both froze. A knock at the front door. My stomach dropped. Sophie's eyes snapped to mine, wide with fear. Another knock. Louder this time. Alex. A voice called through the door. I knew that voice. It was him. Rick. I swallowed hard, forcing my face to stay blank. He doesn't know we're running. Not yet. I leaned in close to Sophie and whispered. Go out the back. Get to my car and get in. Don't look back. Don't stop. Her breath hitched. Dad? Go, I ordered. She hesitated for only a second before nodding and slipping away toward the kitchen. I waited, listening to her light footsteps fade. Then I turned toward the door. Another knock. Harder. Alex. Rick called again, his voice smooth. Come on, man. We need to talk. I forced my body to move, stepping toward the door. My hands were steady as I unlocked it. I pulled it open just enough to see him. Rick stood on the porch, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his leather jacket. He looked like the kind of guy who smiled while twisting a knife in your gut. A jagged scar cut across his jawline, disappearing into the stubble on his face. His eyes studied me, dark and unreadable. Evening, he said, smiling slightly. I said nothing. He tilted his head. You don't look happy to see me. What do you want? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Rick let out a short chuckle. Oh, come on. No need to be hostile. I just thought we should have a little chat. I tightened my grip on the door. We've got nothing to talk about. His smile didn't fade. I think we do. He glanced past me into the house. Where's Sophie? My blood went cold. I kept my face unreadable. Upstairs. Rick nodded slowly, like he was thinking something over. She tell you much? My jaw clenched. She told me enough. His smile widened slightly. Then you know this doesn't have to be difficult. I forced myself to keep my breathing steady. What do you want? Rick leaned in slightly. His voice was calm, almost amused. I want you to do the smart thing, Alex. Take a drive. Clear your head. Don't come back. A pause. Then softer. Or I'll make sure you don't. My stomach twisted, but I didn't react. I glanced past him, subtly checking the driveway. Sophie was gone. Good. She made it to the car. Now I just had to get out of here alive. I exhaled and stepped back. Fine, I said, forcing my shoulders to relax. You win. I'll go. Rick's smile widened. That's a smart man. I nodded toward the street. Let me grab my keys. He stepped aside slightly, motioning toward the driveway. Be my guest. I forced a calm nod and shut the door. Then I ran for the back door as fast as I could. I bolted through the house, my heart pounding in my chest. If Rick realized what I was doing, I'd have seconds, before he reacted. I reached the back door and slipped out into the cold night air. The backyard was dark, but I spotted my car parked just beyond the gate. I ran, keeping low, my breath shallow. If Rick had someone else watching the house, I was screwed. If Sophie wasn't already in the car, I was screwed. If the SUV started moving before I got there, I was screwed. I reached the side of the house and peeked toward the street. There. Sophie was in the passenger seat of my car, crouched low, her terrified face barely visible through the window. The SUV hadn't moved. Yet. I sprinted toward the driver's side, yanking the door open and sliding in. My hands were shaking as I jammed the key into the ignition. Come on! Come on! The engine roared to life just as I heard the front door slam open behind me. Rick's voice cut through the night. Hey! I didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse, my tires screeching against the pavement. In the rearview mirror, I saw him, standing on the porch, watching us with that same sick smile. But he didn't chase us. He didn't run after the car. And that terrified me more than anything. Because it meant he wasn't worried. It meant he already had a plan. We weren't safe yet. I gunned the engine and sped down the street, my hands white-knuckling the wheel. Sophie was breathing fast beside me, gripping the strap of her seatbelt like it was the only thing keeping her together. I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to think. Are they following us? She whispered. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The SUV hadn't moved. Not yet. No, I said. But they will. I turned at the next intersection, trying to put as much distance between us and the house as possible. Sophie swallowed hard. Where are we going? I didn't have an answer. I had no plan. No destination. All I knew was that if Rick wanted me gone, he wasn't going to stop just because I drove away. Jennifer had let this man into our lives. She had let him get close to our daughter. And now, she had let him threaten me without a second thought. The worst part? Sophie had known. I stole a glance at her. She was staring straight ahead, her hands trembling in her lap. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell, to demand to know why she hadn't told me sooner. But she was just a kid. And she was just as scared as I was. I exhaled slowly. We need to go somewhere safe. She nodded, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. Do you trust me, Sophie? I asked, my voice quieter. She hesitated. For just a second. Then, finally, she nodded. Yeah, she whispered. I trust you. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Good. Because I wasn't going to let Rick get his way. Not without a fight. The road stretched out ahead of us, dark and empty. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the black SUV appear at any second. But the street behind us remained clear. Too clear. Rick wasn't following. Why? Sophie sat rigid in the passenger seat, her fingers gripping the strap of her seatbelt. She hadn't spoken since we left the house, her breathing slow and shaky. I knew she was trying to keep it together, but I could feel the weight of everything crushing down on her. I should have said something. Comforted her. Told her it wasn't her fault. But right now, I was too busy figuring out our next move. We couldn't go home. That was obvious. We couldn't go to a hotel. If Rick knew where I worked, knew my schedule, he'd have no problem tracking my credit card transactions. The police? No. I wanted to believe calling them would help, but what could I say? Hey, my wife's lover wants me dead. They'd need proof. They'd need a real reason to believe we were in danger. And Rick, he was smart. He hadn't made a move yet. He was letting fear do the work for him. No. If I wanted to keep Sophie safe, I had to stay ahead of him. Sophie finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" Her voice was small, uncertain. I gripped the wheel tighter. "Somewhere safe." She let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Does that place even exist?" I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure. I turned onto the highway, heading toward the outskirts of the city. I knew a place, a small, out-of-the-way motel where no one would think to look for us. At least, not right away. Sophie shifted beside me. "Dad, I need to tell you something." I kept my eyes on the road. "Go ahead." She hesitated. And that hesitation sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at her. "Sophie?" She exhaled, staring at her hands. "There's something else." "About Rick." I clenched my jaw. "Tell me." She swallowed hard. "I don't think this is just about you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She licked her lips, her voice barely a whisper. "I think he's been using Mom." My stomach twisted. "Using her how?" She shook her head. "I don't know everything. But I heard them talking once, before I knew what was really going on. He said something about money. About her finally being useful." A sick feeling crawled through my chest. This wasn't just an affair. Rick wasn't some random man who had seduced my wife. He had a plan. And Jennifer was just a piece of it. I exhaled slowly. "What else do you know?" She hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "I think he's done this before." My blood ran cold. "Done what?" She looked up at me, her expression haunted. "I think he's gotten rid of people before, Dad. And I think Mom knows." The air in the car felt heavier. I tightened my grip on the wheel, forcing myself to stay calm. We were in deeper than I had realized. And I had no idea how far Rick was willing to go. Sophie's words sent a deep, chilling weight through my chest. "He's done this before. And Mom knows." I didn't want to believe it. But after everything that had happened tonight, how could I not? I forced my voice to stay steady. "What do you mean, Sophie? What did you hear?" She swallowed hard. "It was a few weeks ago. I came downstairs late at night, and they were in the kitchen talking. Mom was nervous. Like really nervous. She kept asking him if he was sure about something. If he was sure it wouldn't come back to them." I clenched my jaw. "Did she say what it was?" Sophie shook her head. "No. But then Rick said, 'You worry too much. No one ever finds them.'" A sick feeling curled in my gut. "Did they see you?" I asked. Sophie hesitated. "No. At least I don't think so." I exhaled, gripping the wheel tighter. Rick wasn't just some guy Jennifer had fallen for. He was dangerous. A predator. And my wife, my ex-wife, was somehow tangled up in it. I turned onto a darker stretch of road, keeping my speed steady. We were almost at the motel. I needed a place to think, to breathe, to figure out our next move. Sophie shifted beside me. "Dad, what if Mom knew what was gonna happen to you?" I didn't answer right away. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Jennifer wasn't some innocent woman caught in a bad situation. She had let this happen. She had let Rick into our lives, knowing exactly what kind of man he was. I finally spoke, my voice flat. "Then she's just as guilty as he is." Sophie didn't say anything. But I could see the pain in her face. As much as she resented Jennifer, she wasn't ready to accept that her own mother might have set me up to be killed. I pulled off the highway onto a deserted road leading to the motel. It wasn't much, just a rundown place off the grid, the kind where people stayed when they didn't want to be found. Perfect. I parked the car and turned to Sophie. "We're staying here for the night. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." She nodded, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The fear. I grabbed my wallet and stepped out of the car, scanning the empty lot. No other cars. No sign of Rick. For now, we were alone. I walked into the motel office, a dingy little room that smelled like stale coffee and cigarette smoke. The old man behind the counter barely looked up as I slid a few bills across the counter. Cash only, I said. No name. He grunted, handing me a key. Room 12. I took it without a word and headed back to the car. Sophie was already getting out, clutching her duffel bag like it was the only thing keeping her together. We walked in silence to the room. I unlocked the door and stepped inside first, scanning every corner. No hidden threats. Just an old bed, a worn-out chair, and a bathroom that smelled like mildew. I locked the door behind us. Sophie sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing her arms. What do we do now? I took a slow breath. We get some rest. Tomorrow, we come up with a plan. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Neither was I. Because deep down I knew Rick wasn't done with us yet. And he was out there, waiting. The motel room was silent except for the faint hum of the old air conditioning unit. Sophie sat on the bed, hugging her knees to her chest. I paced near the window, occasionally pulling the curtain back to check the parking lot. Nothing. No black SUV. No sign of Rick. But that didn't mean we were safe. I sat down on the chair across from Sophie, rubbing my hands together. You need to get some rest, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. She scoffed. Yeah, because that's gonna happen. I couldn't blame her. My own pulse was still racing. I checked my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. Jennifer hadn't tried to reach me, which confirmed what I already knew, she was in on this. I inhaled slowly. Sophie, I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Rick ever threatened you? Her breath hitched slightly, and she looked away. I felt something sharp twist in my gut. Sophie. She hesitated, then shook her head. Not directly, she whispered. But he always had this way of talking. Like he wanted me to know he was in control. He made these comments about how family is fragile, how sometimes people just disappear. My hands curled into fists. That bastard had been planting seeds of fear in her for months. And Mom? I asked. Did she ever try to stop him? Sophie let out a dry, humorless laugh. No. She acted like it was normal. Like it was fine. She looked up at me, her expression full of something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. I didn't know what to do, Dad. I exhaled, trying to push back my anger. It's not your fault, Sophie. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully believe it. A soft buzz suddenly broke the silence. Sophie's head snapped up. My phone. I grabbed it from my pocket, my heart pounding as I read the screen. Unknown number. You should have left when you had the chance. My stomach dropped. Sophie shot up from the bed, eyes wide. Is it him? I clenched my jaw. Yeah. Another buzz. Unknown number. You really think a cheap motel is gonna stop me? I shot to my feet, my pulse roaring in my ears. I rushed to the window and yanked the curtain back. And then I saw it. Headlights. A black SUV pulling into the parking lot. Sophie gasped. Dad? Get your things, I ordered, already grabbing the duffel bag. She didn't argue. We had to move. Now. I turned to the door, but as soon as I did. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of knuckles slamming against the thin motel door. Rick's voice, calm, mocking. Come on, Alex. Let's talk. Sophie froze in place, gripping my arm. I looked at her, forcing my voice to stay steady. We're getting out of here. But you have to trust me. She nodded, fear in her eyes. I looked back at the door. No more running. It was time to end this. The motel door rattled under Rick's heavy knocks. Come on, Alex. Be smart about this. Sophie's grip on my arm tightened, her breathing shallow. I glanced around the room. No way out through the door. The window. I rushed over and yanked the curtain aside. The parking lot stretched into darkness, the black SUV idling near the entrance. But we still had a chance. I turned to Sophie. You're going out first. Run toward the trees behind the lot and don't stop. Her eyes widened. What about you? I'll be right behind you. I forced a reassuring nod. Go. She hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Behind us, the door handle jiggled. Alex, don't make me come in there. I helped Sophie climb through the window, lowering her to the ground. The second her feet touched the pavement, she took off toward the tree line. I moved to follow. Bang! The door burst open. Rick stood in the doorway, his face half lit by the flickering motel light. He wasn't smiling anymore. His right hand hung by his side, fingers gripping a gun. I froze. He exhaled sharply. You really had to make this difficult, didn't you? I kept my hands at my sides, forcing myself to stay still. If you're going to shoot me, just do it. Rick let out a dry chuckle. See, that's the problem. You think this is about you. He took a step forward, keeping the gun low but ready. But it's not. You were just in the way. Of what? I asked, my voice steady. Rick tilted his head. Didn't Sophie tell you? This isn't my first time cleaning up someone else's mess. And your wife? He smirked. She's got a lot of messes. Jennifer. She had let this happen. She had been part of this from the start. Rage coiled inside me, but I kept my expression blank. I needed him distracted. Where is she? I asked. Rick scoffed. You still care? That's cute. He took another step forward. But you're wasting time, Alex. There's no coming back from this. You know that, right? I let out a slow breath. Yeah. Then I lunged. I grabbed his wrist, shoving the gun upward just as he fired. The shot exploded through the room, shattering the bathroom mirror. I rammed my shoulder into his chest, sending us both crashing to the ground. Rick grunted, twisting his arm, trying to aim the gun. I slammed my fist into his wrist, and the weapon clattered across the floor. For a second, we both lunged for it. But I was faster. I grabbed the gun and scrambled to my feet, pointing it directly at his chest. Rick let out a breathless laugh, lying on his back. You're not gonna do it. My hands shook. My chest heaved. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But Sophie. She was still out there. She was watching. And I wasn't going to let her see her father turn into a killer. I took a slow step back, keeping the gun trained on him. Get up. Rick's smirk faded. Get up. I repeated. He did. Slowly. Walk. I ordered, motioning toward the door. Rick hesitated, then started moving. I followed him out of the motel room, scanning the lot. Sophie was hidden behind a row of trees, her wide eyes locked on us. I flicked my gaze back to Rick. You're gonna leave. You're gonna get in that SUV, and you're not coming back. Rick held my stare for a long moment. Then, his lips curled into that damn smirk again. You think this is over? He said softly. I didn't answer. His gaze flickered toward the trees. Toward Sophie. A slow grin spread across his face. It was never about you, Alex. My stomach turned. I stepped forward, pressing the gun to his ribs. Get in the car. Rick let out a quiet chuckle, then slowly raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, all right. He climbed into the SUV, shutting the door behind him. I kept the gun raised, waiting. The engine rumbled to life. The headlights flared. Rick rolled down the window, glancing at me one last time. You think you saved her? His voice was soft, almost amused. You have no idea what's coming. Then he drove off. I stood there, breathless, my hands still shaking. The SUV disappeared into the night. A beat of silence. Then, Dad? I turned. Sophie stepped out of the trees, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked small. Tired. Scared. I lowered the gun. She walked toward me, and for the first time since this nightmare started, she didn't look at me like I was a stranger. She looked at me like she needed me. Like I was her father. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close. We're gonna be okay, I whispered, even though I wasn't sure if it was true. She held on tighter. Promise? I exhaled, pressing my chin to the top of her head. Yeah, I murmured. I promise. But deep down I knew Rick wasn't lying. This wasn't over. Not yet.